Okay, thank you everyone for coming over to the show. I really appreciate. So let me introduce everyone one by one. Alicia, thank you for coming over. As everyone says, you're the empress, the bigger queen, the queen bee, I believe. So thank you for helping me organize this. I really appreciate that.
Oh, you're very
Jo-
welcome. Thank you.
uh, yeah, Renee, welcome again. I was nice talking to you last time, and I'm hoping this time it would be much more fun.
Thank you, Samar. Had a blast.
Thank you. Gina, way above in UK. Thank you coming over as well. You're the first one in. I really appreciate that. And thanks for the wait.
It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Rob, once again, meeting. I appreciate that you come over. It was amazing talking to you last time, understanding the different hats you wear. So welcome again, Mike.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to this conversation as well.
Thank you. Coming down, Joseph, we just had a chat recently. I'm really, as I said, fascinated by your mound builder theory. So I'm like, welcome again. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Tom, we're meeting for the first time, or technically virtual meeting as we call it for the first time. I really appreciate you taking the time on and coming up. Thank you for this.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So now you guys are here. So without wasting much time, I have a very interesting question for you guys. We talk about mind freak in one sense, which basically is a little voice sitting behind our head, which technically sometimes stops us from doing things or puts doubts on our head. On the second side of that is we have a lot of trainers in coaching in modern world who come and tell us that you shouldn't be doing multiple things together. But in this room, I have 5 people who are expert, I must say, who do multi things at the same time. I mean, you each in your own way have organized and done variations of multiplicity type of work, proving every other formula which exists wrong. Now, as I said, when you merge mind freak and there's all these doubts which creep in your head by natural, and then all these trainers come up and teach you that you should focus on one thing, you might not be able to do multiple things together. It creates a new volcanic type of scenario in your head where you're not clear. Someone who's trying to get into business, someone who's trying to do into personal development, it's way too confusing for him. So I'm going to use that and start this conversation here. If you could tell us, what do you think about that?
Well, I can jump in on that first.
Sure.
and definitely speak for someone who has debunked that myth that brands, particularly solo brands that can't run their business empires much like a super Walmart operation, or be able to leverage multiple gifts and talents to make an impact and an income. And you know, initially when you brought this question forward, you were mentioning about the mindset and, you know, how do people think about this when there is so much of the noise, so to speak, of trainers and leaders who have been presenting for quite some time, you know, in terms of you need to focus on, you know, on one particular thing. And that does still apply in some cases. But what I want to speak to right now is the fact that we're in a new era, and that is something that is really fading fast. And unfortunately, most are not aware that that's been a paradigm that's been going out for such a long time. And just like you and I had a conversation even during, you know, our interview, that, you know, a lot of times people have chosen to follow that guidance and listen to focusing on a singular particular thing and in their business. And normally I find that it doesn't work, and people are mostly unfulfilled because there's so much untapped potential that really desires to be expressed. And when that unexpressed potential doesn't come forth, then what happens is that it plays out in the impact and in the income. So the mindset that has to be debunked first is that it's a myth that you can't show up in a multiplicity type of way, and also be able to leverage a lot of different areas of your life. So that's definitely a huge shift that has to take place, especially with what's emerging in the business world. Of course, we can talk about this on so many different levels, but I definitely want anyone else to jump in and piggyback off of that for sure.
What I would say is that people's mindset, their beliefs become their reality. And if you believe you can only do one thing at a time, then that is actually your reality. If you then go and you talk to experts who have the same reality, that that's what they believe to be true, then that myth continues. But if you think about the changes that have gone on in the world, I mean, at one time we all thought that the world was flat until somebody decided that they would have the courage to move away from what was known into something that was unknown. And I think we're actually meeting a new paradigm shift, which is perhaps as powerful as the shift from flat earth theory to round earth theory. And for people like us, we're the vanguards, if you like, who recognize that to harness your true potential, you have to really challenge those beliefs that are keeping you playing small. And that takes courage and takes a bit of work, but it's entirely possible.
Absolutely.
And I would jump and leapfrog, or actually leverage both of yours in the sense of when you talked about, AliNICOLE, about not feeling satisfied, and then you, GINA, about the mindset. When I first was introduced to this principle, it was like I literally had a cellular change in my first conversation, because it was, I've been pushing up against this myth for so long that I was starting to feel that unsatisfied. I was starting to feel like, well, I want to get to that, but I have to complete this first. I need to get to that, but I have to do this first. And as I kept pushing back into the norms, my energy of creativity and passion and purpose started to diminish, because I wasn't connected to my higher purpose, and I wasn't working, GINA, into that higher plane of mindfulness and doing within, you know, the constraints that typically have been out there with the models that we have. And I was just trying to work harder and push harder to try to get that energy lift to fulfill these structures. And then when I had my first conversation with AliNICOLE, it was like, that's a no-brainer. And everything around me started to lighten up and started to disperse that energy. And it's, you know, it sometimes can get a little busy, but it's exciting and it's fresh and it's expanding at the same time. And it really needs to happen, like you both were saying, in the time period that we're in. Things are moving so much out there in the world, and to stay into, you're going to get run over, you're going to be left behind. And so we've got to have people like us that are going to be that example, and learning as we go, right? But being able to be the example in our own right of how to bring forth these greater gifts, these greater leadership, these greater voices that we have.
Yes, beautifully stated. Someone else better jump in before I go in on that.
Well, one of the things that I want to make a clarification on is when we talk about multitasking. Multitasking is something that everyone does. We can chew gum, write a letter, and think at the same time. That's multitasking. But I think what we're speaking to is being multifaceted and multiplicity. And what that means is showing up on different platforms and presenting different aspects of yourself. So not necessarily at the same time, but showing forth our talents and gifts on many different platforms and stages. That's more of what we're speaking to in terms of multiplicity and being multifaceted.
I think that's really true. And what I would say is that the central tenet of all of that is what's important, what's the why? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And if that's really clear, then these multi-layered things work very, very well. And that there's no limit to what you can do.
For sure.
Yes, they work together like a hand in glove, for sure. And, you know, I love the fact that King Joseph brought that up, because that is one of the misunderstandings or misconceptions, if you will, that people really get confused. They believe that when people do quote unquote multiple things, they think it's about doing a lot at the same time. But like you mentioned, it's not really about that. It's just that you have different roles that you are available to serve in at different times. I love to use the metaphor of basketball playing. And so when you're on the court, and though you may have your position as a guard or a forward, but then you play defense and offense, and then you're at the free throw line at some point. So when you're in those particular positions, you're not playing all of those positions at one time. You know, when you're at the free throw line, you're making that shot, and that's the main thing in the moment. The one thing that you are focused on and doing well and with excellence is making that shot. After you do that, then you can go back to whatever role you were playing. And so it's much, like that. It's not really about doing a whole lot at the same time, and it's really not overwhelming. I tell people often it's actually easier to do it this way. It's very much a lighter process, and something going back to what Queen Renee mentioned, just in terms of it may seem like it can keep you busy in some regards. What I find is that the quote unquote busyness normally is only in the building process of when you're setting structures up and new concepts are being introduced, and again, the building process is happening. But after those structures are in place, that's where the simplicity comes in and the lightness of a business model comes in, that's leveraged whether through automation or just using your gifts and talents and services in a very seasonal way. Much like a theme park or a tourist attraction. Sometimes they're not open all year round, but when they are open, then boom, they've got a flood of attraction coming, at that particular time, that during that season. So a lot of what happens in the multiplicity space or cross-industry entrepreneur space, or even multi-dimensional business models, is that sometimes the platforms and services aren't always offered year round. And honestly, that makes for a bigger catch, because sometimes when you're too available, it can actually work against you. And sometimes when you have enroll now, open now, like they do for insurance, sometimes you can only sign up, when you're in the traditional workforce, they have those times where you can enroll for your insurance. And so sometimes it's best to have services like that, unless it's a product-based, service that can be self-serving and continue year-round. But some of the services where you have to engage in, it's typically you want to do some of those very seasonal and not necessarily offer them all the time. But someone else jump in, because like I said, you know me, I can go in on this for sure.
Now, I have a question. I'm going to put a twist in this, right? We're talking about multifaceted. We're talking about having a different role on different platforms and different scenarios. So how about someone running multiple businesses at the same time? Because what I realized that when I started my first company, I was working normal, but there were so many opportunities which were coming left, right, and center, which and I knew there was money to be made in there. I knew, even though if I didn't know how to run, I didn't know anything about those industries, but I knew enough that if I just put a little bit of time and effort, not only it will make me more money, but I'll be successful. And I kept ignoring them for a while, because my sole focus was to get this thing up and running and make it done. But I think within a year, I realized when you focus, when I was just focused on one company, at times I would just get a bit bored. It's not that it was boring. It was not that my passion wasn't in there. It was that I was doing the same thing over and over again without giving any break. So when the next opportunity came in, I actually picked it up. And I started working on that, and that brought in another opportunity. And what happened was, within the last 3 months of my first year of being a businessman, I ended up having 4 different companies doing 4 different things. And I was having a revenue stream from 4 different places without making any extra effort. The only different thing I did was just manage my time well. So
that's what it's about.
While we're talking about being, while we're talking about being different, so wouldn't that also work well?
Oh yeah, well we do that too. At least I do. I do because I have different empires, within my multidimensional structure.
Well, you're setting us up too.
Yeah.
That's one thing too you're doing for us, right? Is you're setting us up, and I think all of us could attest that we have working on building our 5 empires, and it's fun. You know, that's what I was saying about it moved from busyness to more creativeness, and I'm always more inspired and happy and energized, and you know, everything downloads easier. And I know that, like Rob, you have experienced that as well, right? In starting to build out your, and you guys actually demonstrated that recently, you and Joseph did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think back to the basketball analogy from AliNICOLE there. And, you know, for me, the business of expertise is interesting because yes, you can have different levels of expertise in different areas, but really what it's about is how you apply them and where you apply them, and anticipating, I think, what's happening in the marketplace where you intend to play, right? And so you can certainly have some level of expertise, just like a basketball player is a good shooter and dribbler and so on and so forth, the fundamentals, but still play these different roles that you choose.
Oh, that's powerful. Very well said.
We're multifaceted people, all of us. You know, you can be a mother or father, a daughter, a wife, a partner, a friend, a neighbor. We in our lives all the time have so many different roles. And the fact that you're doing this in the business world is just an extension of recognizing that each of us have so much to offer in so many different ways. And if the opportunities turn up, and that's the interesting thing, I think that people, you know, if you go back to the earlier conversation, people who think that you can only have one role, be only doing one thing, those opportunities are there, but they don't actually see them.
Right.
Once you open yourself up to actually, let's see what opportunities there are, how can I develop my potential in whatever direction, then those opportunities become reality. And if you grab them and they work for you, then that's great. It's not everybody's cup of tea. This requires people to have a real sense of who they are and the courage to actually give things a try and know that actually sometimes things won't work, but they will learn and they'll go on to something else. And to really embrace the multifacetedness, I don't think that's a word, but you know, that capacity to be different things in different situations.
It's all impossible until somebody does it, right?
Yeah.
What's that, Rob?
It's all impossible until somebody does it. Somebody smarter than me said that before.
Yeah. I second what Gina says in that, you know, this does require you to get grounded. And I tell you what, that's been one of the greatest gifts of this. I've always played, you know, in what I call my power zone, but at different levels. And that's a constant emerging and peeling off the old container, moving into the new container. And this is a positive up-leveling that we do, not upgrading like you've taught us, but up-leveling. And it becomes natural. And what you said, Gina, sometimes you don't always, it doesn't work. But what happens is that we create in forward momentum, so it is ready. So when people are ready to come and meet it, when they're ready, because we're moving at a faster pace, it's available, and we get to still serve as we continue to reach and grow. And that grounding of ourselves, finding that voice, to me, that's been really interesting facet of this, Samar, is being okay to move with the vibration, with the inspiration, developing those products, and then putting them out there. And maybe they don't click right away, but they're there. And then pretty soon other people are starting to level up and we're already up here on the next 2 or 3 phases up, but now that's ready for them. So our curation may come ahead of time, if I'm saying it right, ahead of the time.
Yes.
But the service is going to be there while we're continuing to evolve.
Yeah, even if it doesn't work, it gives you a new experience. It gives you a new knowledge that it's like falling forward rather than falling backward, or just sticking to where you are. You still stood a step ahead from where you started from, because it might not have worked right now, but it gives you a new perspective. It gives you a new knowledge to see things differently. And the next step you take, you will do it differently. You'll do it better with the new experience, the new knowledge you have. So the opportunities are there. I haven't, Tom, you've been quiet. There's nothing from you here. So let's hear you out.
Well, I'm just gonna co-sign what everybody else said. You know, out with the old, in with the new. It's time to be brave enough to rethink everything you ever thought about what was possible. Revamp your strategy, make it happen.
Well,
Oh,
that's
I
well said.
agree.
Make it happen. I love the part where it said
Mhm.
make it happen, because it's all about
Mhm.
that. I'm gonna throw another spear up here. I'm gonna throw another topic up here for you, Estina.
Okay, before you do that, can I speak to something real quick? Yes,
Absolutely.
I'll just be really brief about it. In terms, I want to go back to something that Gina said about the different roles that we play in our lives, and how that integrates into what we do in the business. And for me, I can resonate with that highly because, I often tell people my life is my niche, and being within my life and leveraging the whole of my life is how I'm able to serve, in a lot of different areas, and at a higher capacity, because I am using my life. And I do see it just as what she said. You have these different roles and functionalities, but you can definitely integrate that into, the business frameworks. And I believe the more that people leverage the whole of themselves by utilizing just their natural ways of being, whether it is a parent, a spouse, an auntie, just influencer, and bring those together. That's what makes the experience much more richer. It makes it much more lighter, because it doesn't have, the life structure does not have all the stigmatisms in it that the business frameworks does, which makes it kind of hard, but when you're just kind of flowing with your life and leveraging that sort of as an empire, I believe it really gives, that balance. At least that's what it has, for me, for sure. So I just wanted to throw that in so that people who, are listening can definitely understand that if you just use your life and get into your life for sure, then you have a much more richer experience in your business.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that, Ali. Coming to that, I have an interesting question for you. I've been thinking about it for a while, and we all are into businesses. We all do our stuff. We try and inspire others. Not only that, we try and help make life easy. But somewhere along the line, we all would have gone through that. That how do we know what we're doing is the right idea? How do we know that is what we're meant to do and the way we are doing is right? But and not only that, absolutely, we all would have done some mistakes somewhere along the line.
Oh,
Is
for
there
sure.
anything you would like to share that you had wished you had knew before and you would have avoided?
It's an interesting
Oh, go
question.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Queen Gina.
And there are times when you think, I wish I'd avoided that in the moment. But with hindsight, as you look back, throughout my life, what I've recognized is that even those things which have, at the time I thought had gone wrong, they'd been a failure, actually learnt such a lot and grown out of that experience. Because generally speaking, we grow far more when we make a mistake or things don't go smoothly than we do when everything's easy. And I think for people who are listening, one of the things I would say to you is most people are frightened of getting it wrong. And for many people, that turns into a paralysis. So that rather than trying, they do nothing. They get caught in that quicksand of trying. And for me, it's about, life is not a spectator sport. You've got to go for it. And in the same way that on the sports field, that sportsmen will misjudge a ball and they'll misjudge a tackle. But over time, if you learn from it, then you become better at it. And you asked, how do you know it's the right thing? And for me, there is a certain lightness about it, that and a certain sense that this is who I am.
Okay.
And if it's heavy and there's that disconnection or a sense of unease in my solar plexus that feels awkward, then I know it isn't. And I think it's having that quiet time to really listen to what your body and your emotions and your intuition is telling you about whether this is right for you or not.
Before anyone answers, I'm going to put a twist in that, because something you said, Gina, intuitions, right?
Yeah.
Now, is it the intuition or is it the mind freak playing up and telling you to do something?
I think it's an interesting question, but for me, there's your mind frame when you are going back to your internal chatter, And often that internal chatter is an unconscious, almost a CD going round and round and round. You should have done this, you shouldn't have done that, you know, why did you do that? But I think once you get a clean mind frame, which is recognizing what's old conditioning or somebody else's voice going in your ear, or that your ego saying to you, you know, that wasn't good enough, and you can clear that and really get some space, and that requires you to be able to sit with yourself, which many people are frightened of, and you really tune in to that inner voice, that gut feeling. And for some people it's a voice in their head, some people it is literally a feeling, and that when it feels light, and I mean light in terms of weight, but also light in terms of bright light, then you know it is you are on the right path. This is what you are meant to do. But I think you need to do the inner work in order to be able to not only listen but interpret that intuition.
True,
Amen.
true. René, what's your take on this?
Well, piggybacking off of Queen GINA, is there's so much need for to fit in and conformity. You know, our natural nature is to be safe and secure, and I have, you know, fallen prey to that early on, and trying to build, you know, my mansion, my empire on the safety, secure container. And you know, for a while it works, but to what point and to what detriment to your purpose. And one of the things I you know, bring out in my client and my work is to really, you know, get them to see themselves separate from what they're doing, you know, get out of their own way, so they can look at it with new eyes and really see, is that something I created out of conformity from what people told me I should be, that messaging from a youth really plays out, our parenting, what we feel we're capable of. And that fear of success, to me, that fear of success is a huge impediment to people. And people would rather struggle than be successful. And I know that sounds weird, but I've watched it over and over. They'd rather keep doing the same thing over and over, like the Einstein quote, than be successful. Because when we raise to the level of being successful, then we have a new presence about ourselves that we got to live up to. And often the people we've conditioned around us to accept us don't necessarily see us as that. So that just brings us back to feeling fear, to want to shrink, because we don't want to have to prove ourselves. We want to be liked. We want to be accepted. That is like a underlying nature as human beings, right? Community, being accepted. So we have these natural organic things that are at play for good reasons in a lot of times of our life. But when it comes to expansion, when it comes to growing and truly owning your voice, your gift, what you're here to do, you have to break out of that mold, and it will require you to step up. And that voice that you talked about early on, you know, talk to it and tell it, hey, you're here for a reason to keep me safe, but guess what? I don't need to be kept safe anymore. We're going to put this energy together, your energy, my energy, and we're going to step forward. And some people are going to be comfortable with it, and some people are not. But we have to recognize it's because it's their own comfort zone is repelling them from our greatness. But that doesn't mean we can't be great. And it does take courage, like you said, Samar, early on too. It requires courage to do that. So it is not for the faint of heart. But when you take that leap, like all of us have said here, it becomes easier, and it becomes so much more rich and fulfilling.
Yes.
So true, so true.
Beautiful.
Joseph.
Yes. Hearing what everyone is saying, and everyone is spot on with respect to it. The only thing I want to add is sometimes when it comes to concepts like this, we think of them in logical steps. And when it comes to being able to identify if the path that you're on is your path, that requires another type of ability. It requires more coming from the heart space. So you have to feel whether or not what you're doing is something that is aligned with you. That's a whole nother process. And as far as the voice is concerned, you have to be able to identify the difference between the chatter and between that voice from source that is within you. You have to be able to distinguish those two things, because sometimes they'll sound close, but they're not exactly the same voice. So if it's the chatter that GINA talks about, where you're going around and around like a CD, you have to be able to identify that and that pattern. And when it's the clear voice coming from source, and that's aligned with the feeling, you begin to understand that this is something that is organically aligned with me, and is something that I need to be doing. So you proceed forward with that. But it's the process of taking the time to sit in the quietness, in the stillness of your mind and in your heart, and being able to clearly distinguish what's coming from the inside.
So
Yes.
true, so true. Rob.
Yeah. I think there's an element here of having to trust your gut a little bit, because when I think about what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm not supposed to be, in a traditional sense, doing what I'm doing now. Society generally was prepared to work for somebody else, right? Go to school, get your degrees, whatever, go work in corporate land, or work your way up the ladder, so to speak. And that was what I certainly intended to do, or was conditioned to do growing up. And then, sort of all of a sudden, the world was changing really fast, and I had some thoughts and ideas about how I could potentially do things differently. And when I did eventually decide to take the leap and kind of move out of the mainstream track, if you will, there were naysayers, inevitably. I still have friends and family who have no idea what I'm doing, right? And I think it's challenging to explain, because they're conditioned, because they've grown up in this and have worked and lived in this traditional way of doing things. And here's somebody like me and the rest of the people in this group who are trying to push the envelope a little bit and prepare ourselves for what's coming next, instead of kind of staying in this traditional track. So I think a part of it is trusting your gut, taking some of that risk, and being prepared for the naysayers that will inevitably come along, and continuing to move forward, even though you're going to get some of that pushback.
Tom, I'm keen to hear your point of view as well.
All right. Well, first, let me say your comfort zone is also your failure zone. And small minds make small money. I never been able to fit in, no matter how hard I tried. Shoot, I'm the black sheep of both sides of my family. And the times I did try to fit in, it, like I said, it didn't work. And so I learned eventually, to never to dim your light, for the sake of others. And if people can't handle your shine, buy them some sunglasses.
Amen, Tom.
I love it, man. I love it. I mean,
Yes.
within like 2 minutes, you just said 3 profound things, which is pretty amazing. You should be talking more, man. You should be giving us
know,
more
right?
advice.
We agree.
Yes. He has a lot to say. Trust me. I'm surprised he hasn't brought up all the books that he's published, in terms of, being a multi-niche writer and everything, and being able to speak to that perspective in terms of when you do multiple things. And sometimes people are multi-niche writers, where they're just writing for a lot of different niches, versus having, so many different empires or platforms that they're trying to serve. Maybe a great interview for you two. Throw that out there.
Man, I do respect anyone who writes book. Anyone who writes book, because it takes so much of dedication and heart. And if you have written way more than one, man, you guys are on a total different level. Because I remember writing one is a piece of headache I had. I mean, it just boggles me how how you can put all your thoughts together. I tried, I did write one, and I remember it was such a struggle because on a day I could phrase something in a way, and next day when I came and reread it, I would want to rephrase it again into a different way. I was never ever satisfied. So if you guys are able to do that again and again, that is one hell of a skill. I salute that stuff. It's just crazy.
Well, I got number 28 coming out real soon.
What are you,
Wow.
a writing machine?
Yeah, he's my star, remember?
Yeah, true.
I just got a lot of content I've been sitting on for years, and
Yeah.
finally getting it out.
Well, I hope the world is ready for it, mate. If you're gonna throw that much truth on someone's face, they've got to be ready for it as well. Otherwise, it's gonna hurt them very bad once they read their stuff. Before I let you guys go, and I know you all are busy people in your own time, I have one simple question I'm gonna ask you. With COVID, things have changed. So my next question is a two-part. First, I just want to know if all you guys are well where you are, because I know in every different country, different state, we are in a different phase of lockdown to no lockdown to dramas all over the place. And people being people are not, it doesn't help. And the second is COVID. Has COVID given you opportunities? And if it has, what kind of opportunities? And what would you recommend people? And how do they recommend people that how do they look for opportunities during this time? I might just start with Rob because he doesn't speak much right now.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. As you know, I'm in Western Canada, and as far as health and safety, we're actually doing relatively well compared to some other parts of the world. So, we're not locked down at the moment. We're having some discussions about how children will return to school in September, and things are looking pretty good at this point anyway. And as we all know, things can change quickly, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. As far as opportunities, for me, and Joseph and I were discussing this a little bit just yesterday, when we look at what we're doing in terms of business in the online realm, there were, for some time, a lot of progressive organizations have been looking at what operations they could move into that digital space. And we always had these more conservative organizations that sort of didn't take it very, very seriously, I don't think. But COVID, I think, has catalyzed that transformation process. And so for anybody who has already been preparing to be in this sort of digital first business era, I think COVID has kind of brought attention to those types of businesses. And certainly for somebody like me who's already operating there and trying to help and train and encourage others to operate there, that's good for my line of work. So there's certainly been lots of opportunity, I think, for me.
Good. We'll go to Tom. Sorry. I cut you off. I thought I'll just let the men speak a little bit more.
Sounds good.
Tom.
We got all these every day, and this time of year is not my favorite time of year because it's so hot, and I'm hot natured. I get hot real easy, so and it's mandatory for us to wear a mask. So I don't feel like dealing with the mask police. So I just stay at home so I don't have to wear it. And other than that, it's still been business as usual for me. And just working on, like I said, I'm working on book number 28. I'm done with the writing portion. I'm just doing the final edits and then getting ready to have a cover designed, and just been working on all the other projects I'm working on. So that's pretty much it for me.
Cool. All right. Joseph?
Well, for
Hello?
me, I'm here in Orlando, and that's the epicenter right now of the virus with the numbers escalating. But for me and my close family here, we're all fine in the midst of it. Unlike Tom, I enjoy the hot weather. It doesn't get too hot for me. So I am pretty much at home with that part of it. But as far as opportunities, what this whole epidemic has presented to me is, and reminded me of, is the importance of maximizing your moments, taking advantage of the time that you have and the time that you have on this planet. But right now, specifically with respect to the virus, get the projects done, get the projects started,
Yes.
get the businesses moving, whatever it takes to make progress is what our focus ought to be right now. And that's what I'm encouraging everyone that I speak to do. Those opportunities have presented themselves to me. Like I often say, I've been more busy during this Corona time than I've been before it. And I've taken advantage of it with different opportunities, with different projects. And of course, AliNICOLE has many projects for us to engage ourselves in. But it's been a very, very busy time, a very active time, and a very productive time. And I just want to encourage people to take advantage of it, maximize the moments of your life. And that's what we need to be doing.
I guess we'll go with René.
Okay, Samar. We let the boys speak, so it's our turn. No, no. Actually, the Kings have said it very well. There's probably not a lot to add there, other than this is a time for dipping into those creative projects, things that you've been putting off, and go for it. And what do you got to lose? I mean, that's what I'm telling myself. That's what I'm telling my clients. This is, do the things that are the system and structural, strengthen those so that you can, what I call, draft them, leverage them when everything opens back up. But also pull something from your dreams, from your vision, and start to work on it now. Start to let that energy fulfill you during these times where there's uncertainty and fear and concern, in the world around us, and let that fill your reservoir. And you're going to feel a lot healthier and wellness about yourself when you take some more control by reaching into some of those bigger dreams and not just waiting till the time is right. So that's all I would add.
True. Who's going next?
Queen Gina, do you want to?
So I'm in the UK. We're just beginning to come out of lockdown. And so I've had many weeks where I've been geographically and physically in a limited space. But in a sense, that's opened up the opportunity for my mind and imagination to expand. Certainly working with AliNICOLE and the group has been great. I've been writing, doing a lot of content. I'm fortunate in that I'm already in the digital space and well placed in terms of training and coaching and so on. But for me, I think the biggest thing I would say is it's an opportunity to reflect on what's really important. And for me, one of those things has been relationships. And so one of the things that I've been doing is I've been reaching out to not just connect with people, because you can have lots of connections. I've got 18,500 connections on LinkedIn, for example, but actually making contact, having conversations and creating relationships. And some of them we've had a nice conversation, but with many of them, it's opening up opportunities for both of us and for other groups of people. And so I think whatever your circumstance as it may be, you can either see it as a limitation and talk about the things that, it means you can't do, or you can use it to really open the door of possibilities and opportunities. And so investing that time in creating and deepening relationships for me has been perhaps the biggest gift of this time.
That is so true.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well said.
Well stated. Well, I guess it leaves me.
Boss you up.
I have to agree with Queen Renee that the Kings for sure, and then actually just hearing from the rest of them, everyone has really stated really all that could be said. Honestly, for me, when it comes to the whole dynamics around COVID, and thank you so much, first of all, for asking if we all were well, and my family and I, we are doing well. Thank you. When it comes to this topic, it's been very interesting for me because a lot didn't change for me in terms of all of the different shifts that most people were having to make and those different adjustments, just globally, because I was already in the digital space like most of them, were. My life and business, so to speak, was sort of already prepared for something of this magnitude, even not knowing that obviously something like this was going to occur. But with having the platforms and the different opportunities for people to take advantage of, those things were in place. So things have continued just to progress. But one of the things I will say is that with anything that occurs, it gives everyone an opportunity to level up and reposition, and of course, reprioritize. And even if you're doing things, quote unquote, well, there's always the opportunity to continue to advance that and never, take that for granted. And especially during these times, for sure, it's important to be, as Queen Gina said, fostering the relationships and making those connections and making them meaningful, for people. And also skilling up during these times. I'm someone, I'm cross-trained, as you all know, in over 50 areas. And let me tell you, I don't sleep on any of that. I don't take that for granted. I'm always learning something, always investing, in myself. And I encourage other people to continue to do that and continue to be more in your life, for sure, because you have this one life to live, and you also don't want to be using all of your time to be so engaged in a lot of different things that may not be as meaningful. But when you reprioritize or you focus on what's most important, and our missions and our businesses, of course, are important because we're here to be of a higher service to not just the business community, but I believe the world at large. And so when we are focused on those things, then we will take better care of ourselves. We will manage our time more effectively, and also make sure that we are continuously on the right path, which is always continuing to evolve and unfold differently. So with this whole pandemic, it just gives everybody another wake-up call. And even for those, like I said, who maybe were already ahead of the game and things maybe haven't changed much for them, it's still always that opportunity to honor your life and continue to move your visions forward and bring as many people as possible into that space as well.
True. That is so true. That is so true. Thank you for all. You know what? Every time I talk to you, all of you, I just realize that people spend thousands and thousands of hours reading books and understanding. And I know, Tom, I'm not asking any people not to read the books. I would love them to read your books. But what I'm saying is, this is like a master class. You just sit down and quietly listen to what all you have to say, and you get so much out of it. Like, there's so much clarity. There's so much new information, new perspective you get, that it gives you food for thought to think about where you are, where you want to be, and where you want to go ahead to. So yes, while reading books and all do help, but I think listening to you guys also helps a lot. And I'm hoping everyone who's listening to this conversation will get the same kind of, now I said, the same kind of feeling I am, the same kind of knowledge I am. So I really, really appreciate you all coming together. Different time zones. It takes a lot of an effort. So yeah, stay blessed. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.